There's something about the smell of fresh bread that just makes your house feel like a home. This is Sarah from jacksonsjob.com bringing a realistic baking video so you can see what to really expect. What I love about this is you don't need to have a mixer, you can do it all by hand. Here is a list of ingredients, but there will also be a link below. I do highly recommend using weighted measurements over cup measurements as you'll have a much better success rate in making homemade bread. To follow along, I'm going to make a basic white bread. You need 3 1/3 cups of flour, which is 500 grams, and 1 teaspoon of salt, which is 5 grams mixed together. Then you need 1 1/4 cups of water, or 300 milliliters, and 2 teaspoons of yeast, or 7 grams. I like to mix the yeast in the water and let it sit just briefly to get it to dissolve. Some people tell you to proof it, where it makes it bubbly and all foamy. I don't like to do that step unless I'm not sure if my yeast is good. One tip is to store your yeast in the freezer. It lasts forever. I have yeast that's over 2 years old and it still works really well. Now I just pour it all together and I mix it with the back of a spoon. You can use your hand in this step and it will work just fine. You'll just get a little sticky. I just do this because it's a lot faster for me. Once you have that done, you want to turn it on to a clean work surface. Please make sure your work surface is clean, because if not, this step will pick up any kind of debris that you've left behind. You don't want last meal's dinner in this bread dough. That would be just weird and gross. And scrape out as much as possible. One thing I like to do, I like to skip the bowl altogether and just mix it all on the counter to begin with. That way I don't even have to worry about any bits being left behind. And at first I'm just going to kind of squeeze the bread together and I'm picking up all the crumbs. This takes just a few moments. And I'm just kind of walking it back and forth, and then I'll gather up some more of the crumbs. You don't want to toss those aside. You need those. Every bit counts. If you weigh out your ingredients, you'll have consistent bread every day. If you don't, you have to follow these weird recipes online that will tell you to use between 3 to 5 cups of flour until your dough is no longer sticky. And I don't understand why they do that, because some breads you want sticky. Think of a nice sourdough bread, and other breads you want dry, like a bagel. So if you want to have really good bread making skills, a set of scales will do you a lot of good. Now in a moment I'm going to finish trying to pick up all the crumbs and I'll show you how to start kneading your bread. There are a few methods you can use. You can do the rocking method, which is here. You start pushing the bread in between your hands and just rocking it back and forth. You want to be careful with this part. You want to keep your back really straight and you don't want to twist too much, because after a long time it will start to hurt your back. So I'm doing some exaggerated motions to show you what not to do. Imagine standing really tall, keep your hands close to your body, and make shorter motions like this. After a while, you'll start to see that it becomes more elastic and it will start to look more like dough. It won't take long at all, maybe about a minute or two. At that point, you can test it out and see what it looks like. What you want to do is push your finger into the dough ball. If it bounces back, then you're ready. If it doesn't bounce back and stays put, then you know it's not kneaded well enough. See this? You need to knead it longer, even though it's nice and smooth. Another way to test it is to try to stretch out the dough. As you stretch it, if it ends up tearing pretty easily, then you know it's not ready. Here's another method. I like to use one hand because I have an injury and it's a lot safer for me. You can keep your body a lot straighter and you can keep your elbows at a better, easier consistency. Now it does take a little bit of work to figure out how to do this in the beginning, but it is a lot better for people with disabilities or injuries. This is actually my preferred method, and I think it's a lot easier on your hands, shoulders, and back. Now you're going to see that it's a lot more stretchy and it might be ready. We will test it by trying to see if we can do the window pane test, where you stretch out the dough and be able to see through it without it tearing. As you can see, it's starting to work. Is it ready? Oh, there's a tear. Got to start again. The last method I was taught was to push away from you and kind of rock it like this. This is my least favorite method because you really do put a lot of strain on your upper back. This is not good for anyone that has any kind of limitations, and I recommend using either the one-handed method or the rocking method, because this one is just very strenuous, and after a while you get tired pretty quickly if you have any kind of limitations. Now let's check it again for the window pane test. As you can see, you can start seeing straight through there, and it's not tearing. It's tearing just a slight little bit, but that's okay. This is not tearing until you really give it a lot of pull. So it's actually ready to go. Now I'm going to show you again something that is not recommended by me. A lot of times they will tell you to cover your bowl in oil and your dough ball. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to let it rise, and I'm going to let you see what happens to the dough when it's oily. It works for some recipes, but I don't like it for the lean doughs. And you'll see why in just a few moments. You cover the dough and you let it rise for about 1 to 2 hours, depending on your level of humidity, how hot it is in your room. You just watch it and see when it starts to get nice and bubbly. This one was about 2 hours. I now just separate it into 2 pieces. If I was making this formally, I would have weighed it out just so it'd look even. And now, as you can see, this dough has been quite oily from the rising in the oiled bowl. Now I'm going to do just what I did in my previous recipe on how to make bread, and I'm going to try to roll it up and get some tension. And then I'm just going to set it aside and let it rest for a minute while I work on the other one. This other one I'm going to show you, I'm going to do it similar in the beginning. I'm going to make it into a rough rectangular shape, and then I'm going to fold down the top part, fold in the edges just slightly, about a ½ inch, and then continue to fold down and push. You're doing this to create some tension. And once you get to the end, you just kind of roll it back and forth to make it a little bit longer. This is just one of the many methods that you can do to shape a loaf. The first one, I'm going to leave it as it was so that you can see the difference when they come out. Some people swear you'll see a dramatic difference. Let's find out by seeing a visual. As you can see, I'm just picking up the other one without doing any more additional rolling. Remember which one is on the left and which one's on the right. After covering it again for about 30 to 60 minutes, you'll want to preheat your oven to 450 or 230 degrees Celsius. I like to put in a small tray of water so that it will create some steam and give you a crispy crust. Just be careful when opening the door to put in your bread, because the steam will waft out and hit you in the face. You'll want to bake these between 20 to 25 minutes or until golden brown. Now if you like, you can cut some marks on the top to give them a place to escape, hopefully, the steam. Now let's see what happened because I used oil in my bowl. See how they're not as pretty and the edges tended to fall out and the bottom doesn't look as nice? This is what happens when you use an oily bowl. I recommend skipping that step. Still eat it because it's still delicious no matter what it looks like. Eventually you'll get prettier loaves as you go. Please don't get discouraged when things don't work out in the kitchen. Things always still taste better when it's homemade. Happy baking!